November 18th, 1942, Gila River War Relocation Center, Arizona. Harry Fukuhara sat across a metal desk from a United States Army captain whose name he heard once and would never remember. The office was a converted storage room in the camp administration building. No windows, single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The captain wore dress uniform. Harry wore the clothes he had been wearing for 3 days because laundry in the camp ran once a week, and yesterday was not laundry day. The captain opened a folder and read something Harry could not see. Then he looked up. "Do you have family in Japan?" Harry felt his throat close. "Yes." The captain waited. "My 3 brothers," Harry said. The captain wrote something in the folder. "Where in Japan?" "Hiroshima." The captain wrote that down too. He did not look up. "How long since you have had contact with them?" 14 months, Harry said. September 1941 was the last letter. The captain closed the folder. He looked at Harry for a long moment. "Your country needs your language skills," he said. "You were born in Seattle. You are an American citizen, but you speak Japanese fluently. You can read it. You can write it. That makes you valuable." Harry said nothing. "We are forming special units," the captain continued. "Military intelligence. You would be trained to translate captured enemy documents, interrogate prisoners of war, provide tactical intelligence to field commanders. You would serve your country in a way most Americans cannot." Harry understood what the captain was not saying. Most Americans could not tell the difference between a Japanese soldier and Harry Fukuhara standing on a street corner in Los Angeles. Most Americans had cheered when Executive Order 9066 sent families like his into the desert. But now the Army needed something most Americans could not provide. They needed people who looked like the enemy and spoke like the enemy but would betray the enemy. "What happens if I say no?" Harry asked. The captain leaned back in his chair. "You remain here for the duration of the war. Your family remains here. When the war ends, you go home, if you still have a home. What happens if I say yes? You report to Camp Savage in Minnesota in 3 weeks. 6 months of intensive training. After that, assignment to a military intelligence unit, most likely Pacific Theater, Hawaii, Australia, New Guinea, wherever we need Japanese language specialists. Can my family leave the camp if I volunteer?" "No!" The captain said it without hesitation, without apology. Harry had expected that answer, but hearing it still landed like a fist in the stomach. "Your service will be noted in your family file," the captain added. "It will reflect well on them when loyalty reviews are conducted." Harry looked at the concrete floor. The room smelled like dust and old paper. He thought about the question the captain had asked. "Do you have family in Japan?" "3 brothers. Pierce, Frank, Victor." The last letter from Pierce had arrived on September the 3rd, 1941. 4 pages, written in careful Japanese, about starting university classes, about thinking of visiting California someday, about hoping the political situation between America and Japan would improve. Pierce had signed the letter with their family name in kanji, Fukuhara, deep field. The name meant deep field. That letter was 3 months old when Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor. Harry had not heard from Pierce or Frank or Victor since. He did not know if they were still in Hiroshima. He did not know if they had been conscripted into military service. He did not know if they were alive. If Harry volunteered for this program, he would be trained to interrogate men who might have gone to school with his brothers. He would translate documents written by officers who might have trained his brothers. He would provide intelligence that would be used to plan bombing raids on cities where his brothers might be living. But if he refused, he would spend the rest of the war in this camp. Block 28, Barrack 7, Room 4, 20 feet by 25 feet. Tar paper walls, thin enough to hear the couple in the next room arguing about whether their son should volunteer for the segregated army unit being formed for Nisei soldiers. Communal latrine, with no doors on the stalls. Mess hall, serving food on metal trays that reminded Harry of the dog bowls his family had owned before the war, before they sold everything. Before armed soldiers loaded them onto buses and drove them into the desert. The captain was watching him. I need an answer by 1700 hours today. Harry looked at his hands. They were cleaner than most people's hands in the camp because he worked in the administration block, not in the fields. Some families in Gila River had been farmers before the war. They were assigned to agricultural details, growing vegetables in the Arizona desert to feed 10,000 internees. They came back to the barracks each evening covered in dust that turned to mud when they tried to wash in the communal showers. Their hands were cracked and bleeding. Harry's hands were soft because he filed papers and answered telephones for camp administrators who were white and who went home each evening to housing outside the barbed wire. I will do it, Harry said. The captain opened the folder again and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the desk with a pen. Sign at the bottom. Harry picked up the pen. The paper was a volunteer agreement form. He read the first paragraph. It said he was volunteering for military service in the United States Army. It said he understood he would be trained for duties related to military intelligence. It said he would be subject to military discipline and military law. It said his service was voluntary and he could not withdraw his volunteer status after signing. Harry signed his name. The pen scratched on the cheap paper. The captain took the form and placed it in the folder. You will receive written orders within 10 days. Report to the camp administration office when you are instructed. Do not discuss this assignment with anyone outside your immediate family. Not other internees, not friends, nobody. Military intelligence work is classified. Violation of operational security is a court-martial offense. Yes, sir, Harry said. The captain stood. Harry stood. They did not shake hands. Harry walked out of the administration building into November sunlight that was bright and cold. The camp spread in front of him in neat rows. Barracks made of wood frames and tar paper. Guard towers at each corner. Barbed wire fencing the entire perimeter. 10,000 people living in a space designed for temporary occupancy that had become permanent because the war was not ending quickly and nobody in Washington knew what to do with American citizens who had Japanese faces. Harry walked back to Block 28. He passed the mess hall where lunch service had just ended. He passed the school where children sat at desks learning American history from teachers who were also internees. He passed the administration building where other internees worked as clerks and translators and typists earning $19 a month. He passed families sitting outside their barracks in the thin November sun because sitting outside was better than sitting inside a 20 by 25 foot room with 3 other people and nothing to do. His mother was in their room when Harry opened the door. She was mending a shirt. His younger sister was at school. His mother looked up. They want me to volunteer for military service, Harry said. His mother set down the shirt. What kind of service? Intelligence work. Translation. I would be trained in Minnesota and then sent to the Pacific. His mother was quiet for a moment. Will we be released if you go? No. She nodded slowly. She picked up the shirt again and continued mending. When will you leave? 3 weeks. She did not ask him if he had already signed the papers. She knew he had. She knew because Harry would not have come back to the room to tell her about the offer if he had not already accepted it. That night, Harry lay on his cot listening to the sounds of 10,000 people trying to sleep in a desert camp, coughing from the next room, a baby crying 3 barracks away, wind pushing against the tar paper walls. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. Dogs were not allowed in the camp, but people smuggled them in anyway because a dog was something that did not care about executive orders or racial categories or military necessity. A dog was something that recognized you as a person. Harry thought about the choice he had made 5 years earlier. May 1938. He was 17 years old, standing on a dock in Hiroshima. His 3 brothers stood next to him. Their relatives stood behind them. The ship that would take Harry back to America was loading passengers. Pierce had asked him one more time to stay. We can all finish school here together, Pierce had said. We can go to university here. Why do you want to go back? Harry had not been able to explain it in a way that made sense to anyone, including himself. He just knew that Japan felt temporary to him in a way it did not feel temporary to his brothers. Japan felt like a place he was visiting. America felt like home, even though he had only lived in America until he was 13 years old. So he had boarded the ship. He had sailed across the Pacific. He had enrolled in an American high school. He had graduated. He had found work in Los Angeles. He had written letters to his brothers in Japanese that became harder to write each month because his Japanese was getting worse and their English was getting worse, and the distance between them was not just geographical anymore. And then the war started, and the distance between them became enemy territory. Harry had made his choice in 1938 without knowing what that choice would cost. Nobody could have known. But now, in November 1942, lying on a cot in an internment camp in Arizona, Harry understood that every choice splits the world into before and after. Before he left Japan, he had 3 brothers. After he left Japan, he had 3 brothers who lived on the other side of a war. Now he had volunteered to work for the American military against the Japanese military. He had volunteered to use his knowledge of Japanese language and Japanese culture as a weapon. He had volunteered to translate the words of Japanese soldiers so American commanders could use those words to kill more Japanese soldiers. And somewhere in Japan, Pierce and Frank and Victor were making their own choices about which uniform to wear and which flag to serve. If they were conscripted, they would have no choice. They would serve Japan because they lived in Japan. But Harry wondered if they thought about him the same way he thought about them. Did they wonder which side of the war he was on? Did they think he was sitting safely in California somewhere? Did they know about the camps? Harry closed his eyes. In 3 weeks, he would board a train to Minnesota. In 6 months, he would be in the Pacific Theater. In a year, he might be translating documents that mentioned his brothers' names. He might be interrogating prisoners who knew his brothers. He might be providing intelligence that would lead to their deaths. But tonight, he was still in the camp. Tonight, he was still just an internee with a number and a barracks assignment. Tonight, he could still pretend the choice he made would not matter. Tomorrow, he would start preparing to leave. July 23rd, 1944, Saipan, Mariana Islands. Harry Fukuhara opened the first diary in a stack of 12. The tent smelled like canvas and coral dust. Artillery fire thudded in the distance, close enough to feel in his chest. The diary was standard issue. Brown leather cover, pages yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was neat, educated, the kind of handwriting that came from years of careful practice, with a brush before switching to a pen. The diary had been recovered from a dead Japanese soldier 3 hours earlier. Harry did not know how the soldier died. He did not ask. That information was not relevant to his work. His work was to translate the diary, extract any tactical intelligence, and move to the next one. 12 diaries. Estimated time per diary, 40 minutes. He would be finished by midnight if he did not stop. Harry had been doing this work for 11 months. September 1943 to now. Brisbane first, then forward deployment to Saipan 2 months ago. In that time, he had interrogated 78 Japanese prisoners and translated hundreds of captured documents. His commanding officer had commended him twice. His reports were considered among the most detailed and actionable in the Allied translator and interpreter section. Other interrogators asked him for advice. How do you get them to talk? What is your method? Harry's method was simple. He listened. The first time he understood how this worked was September 14th, 1943, his first real interrogation. Not practice, not role play, but a real Japanese soldier captured on New Guinea 3 days earlier, 19 years old. Wounded in the leg, sitting across a table from Harry with his hands in his lap, and an expression that shifted from confusion to recognition when he saw Harry's face. Japanese features, American uniform. The prisoner did not know what this meant. Harry had introduced himself in Japanese. My name is Harry. Then he had asked where the prisoner was from, not his unit, not his rank. Just where he was from. The prisoner had said Kyoto, and Harry had asked about Kyoto, the temples, the festivals, and the prisoner had talked. For 40 minutes, he had talked about his family, his school, his life before the war. At some point during that conversation, without realizing it, the prisoner had mentioned his unit designation, his commanding officer's name, his deployment history, information that Harry wrote down in his notebook as if it were all equally important, as if he were just trying to understand this person's story. When the interrogation ended, Harry had a full page of tactical intelligence. 3 weeks later, he'd learned that his report had been used to plan an air raid on a Japanese supply depot. The raid was successful. The depot was destroyed. Casualties unknown. Harry had tried to think about this the way his instructors taught him to think about it. He had done his job. He had extracted intelligence. That intelligence had military value. That was the beginning and end of the analysis. But lying on his cot that night, he had understood something his instructors had not said directly. The prisoner had trusted him because Harry had shown genuine interest. Harry had not been pretending to care about the temples in Kyoto. He actually cared, and that genuine empathy was precisely what made the interrogation effective. The prisoner felt understood. The prisoner felt safe. The prisoner talked. Over the following months, Harry refined this approach. He learned which questions opened conversations and which questions closed them. He learned to recognize when a prisoner was starting to trust him. He learned that silence was often more effective than oppressing. He learned that small gestures mattered, offering water, offering a cigarette, treating a prisoner with basic courtesy. that the prisoner had not expected. These gestures created gratitude. Gratitude created obligation. Obligation made prisoners want to reciprocate, and reciprocation meant information. Harry was good at this work. He knew he was good at it because prisoners talked to him when they refused to talk to other interrogators. He knew he was good at it because his commanding officer told him he was good at it. He knew he was good at it because other interrogators studied his reports and tried to replicate his methods. But Harry also knew something else. He knew that his effectiveness came from the fact that his empathy was real. He genuinely liked most of the prisoners he interrogated. He genuinely wanted to understand them. He genuinely felt sympathy for their situations. They were scared, wounded, far from home, expecting to be executed. When Harry treated them with kindness, when he listened to their stories, when he showed them that he saw them as human beings, he was not acting. He meant it. And that was the problem, because his genuine kindness produced genuine trust, and that trust produced intelligence, and that intelligence produced death. Harry's empathy was not separate from his work. His empathy was his work. The more he cared, the more effective he became. The more effective he became, the more people died because of information he provided. He had thought about this many times over the past 11 months. He had tried to find a way to reconcile what he felt during interrogations with what happened after interrogations. He had not found a way. The system called his work intelligence gathering. The system gave him commendations. But Harry understood what the system did not say. He was using human connection as a weapon. Every successful interrogation was a betrayal of the prisoner's trust. Every intelligence report was a potential death sentence. Harry opened the diary on the desk in front of him. July 23rd, 1944. Saipan. The war was still happening. Prisoners were still being captured. Documents were still being translated. Intelligence was still being extracted. People were still dying. And Harry was still doing his job because that was what he had volunteered to do in November 1942, and there was no mechanism for unvolunteering. He began reading the first entry, May 15th, 1944. The soldier described arriving on Saipan, the journey from Japan, the condition of the transport ship, standard information. Harry translated it into English in his notebook. Next entry, May 22nd. Training exercises, complaints about food, mentions of other soldiers in his unit. Harry translated. Next entry, June 3rd. Letter received from home. The soldier described feeling homesick. He described missing his family. He described wanting the war to end. Harry kept translating. The entries were routine. No tactical intelligence, no unit movements, no command decisions, just the daily life of a soldier far from home. This was common with personal diaries. Most contained nothing useful, but they still had to be processed because occasionally a soldier would mention something valuable without realizing it. A casual reference to supply shortages, an offhand comment about troop morale. These small details accumulated into larger intelligence pictures. Harry reached an entry dated June 8th, 1944. The soldier had written about receiving a letter from his family. He described his hometown. He mentioned specific streets, Honkawacho, Motomachi, specific landmarks, the Aioi Bridge, the Gokoku Shrine, places Harry recognized immediately, because he had walked those streets when he was 13 years old, living with relatives in Hiroshima. Harry stopped reading. He looked at the diary in his hands. The leather cover was worn. The pages were stained with something that might have been mud or might have been blood. This soldier had been from Hiroshima. This soldier had lived in the same city where Harry had attended school for 5 years. This soldier had walked the same streets Harry had walked. This soldier had possibly attended the same schools. This soldier had possibly known the same people. This soldier had possibly known Harry's brothers. Harry set the diary on the desk. He looked at his hands. They were shaking slightly. He made them stop. He picked up the diary again. He continued reading. The soldier described his family's neighborhood. He described the house where he grew up. He described the view from his window. He described the sound of the river. Every detail was specific. Every detail was real. Harry could see the places the soldier described because Harry had been to those places. The soldier was not writing about an abstract hometown. He was writing about Harry's hometown, the place where Harry's brothers lived if they were still alive. Harry turned the page. That June 15th entry. The soldier wrote about his younger brother who was still in school. He wrote about his sister who worked at a factory. He wrote about his mother who sent him letters every week. He wrote about missing them. He wrote about hoping to return home after the war. There was no tactical intelligence in these entries, no military value. But Harry kept translating because that was the procedure. Every captured document had to be processed regardless of apparent value. He translated the entries about the soldier's family. He translated the entries about the soldier's memories of Hiroshima. He translated the entries about the soldier's fear that he would never see his home again. The final entry was July 19th, 1944. 4 days ago, the soldier wrote that American forces had landed on Saipan. He wrote that fighting was intense. He wrote that casualties were heavy. He wrote that he was scared. The entry ended mid-sentence. The soldier had not finished writing before whatever happened to him happened. Harry closed the diary. He sat in the tent, listening to distant artillery. The sound was constant. It had been constant since the American invasion began on June 15th. 38 days of fighting. The island was not yet secured. Japanese forces were still resisting. More prisoners were being captured every day. More documents were being recovered every day. More diaries were being translated every day. Harry looked at the stack of 11 remaining diaries on the desk. He looked at the one he had just finished. He had to write a summary. He had to assign a classification. He had to determine intelligence value. He picked up his pen. He wrote, Personal Diary, May 15th to July 19th, 1944. Soldier from Hiroshima Prefecture. No tactical intelligence. Family references only. Classification, low value. He placed the diary in the processed stack. He reached for the next diary in the unprocessed stack. He opened it. He began reading the first entry. He began translating, because that was his job, because 11 more diaries were waiting, because the war was not going to stop, because Harry Fukuhara had just translated the final words of a dead soldier from his hometown, because stopping was not an option, because there was no procedure for an interrogator to say, I cannot do this anymore. Harry translated the second diary, then the third, then the fourth. He worked through the night. He finished the last diary at 02:30 hours. He wrote summaries for all 12. He classified them. He submitted them to his commanding officer. 10 of the 12 contained no tactical intelligence. 2 mentioned supply shortages that might be useful for operational planning. Harry walked back to his tent. The artillery had stopped. The island was quiet except for occasional small arms fire in the distance. Harry lay on his cot. He did not sleep. He thought about the diary from the soldier from Hiroshima. He thought about his brothers. He thought about the last letter he had received from Pierce in September 1941. That was almost 3 years ago. He did not know if his brothers were alive. He did not know if they had been conscripted. He did not know if they were in Japan or somewhere else in the Pacific Theater. He did not know if his intelligence work had contributed to operations that might have killed them. He knew that his work was helping to win the war. He knew that winning the war would eventually end the suffering of everyone, including Japanese civilians, including people in Hiroshima, including possibly his brothers if they were still alive. But he also knew that every report he wrote, every interrogation he conducted, every diary he translated was a small act of betrayal against people who shared his language and his culture and possibly his blood. The system did not acknowledge this contradiction. The system said Harry Fukuhara was an American soldier doing his duty. The system said his language skills were valuable. The system said his work saved American lives. All of this was true, but it was not the whole truth. The whole truth was that Harry was using his knowledge of Japanese culture to hurt Japanese people. The whole truth was that his empathy was a weapon. The whole truth was that he had become very good at a job that required him to betray every person he interrogated and every document he translated. Harry closed his eyes. Tomorrow there would be more interrogations, more captured documents, more diaries, more translations, more intelligence reports, more operations, more deaths. He would do his work because that was what he had volunteered to do, and because the alternative was returning to an internment camp in Arizona and accomplishing nothing. He would continue to be kind to prisoners because kindness worked. He would continue to feel genuine empathy because genuine empathy worked better than false empathy. He would continue to betray the trust of every prisoner who trusted him because that was his function in this war. But tonight, lying on his cot on Saipan listening to silence, Harry understood that he would carry this work for the rest of his life, not just the memories. The understanding that he had been good at something that required him to be two people simultaneously. The Harry who genuinely cared about prisoners. And the Harry who used that care to extract information that led to their deaths and the deaths of their comrades. These were not two different people. They were the same person. That was what made him effective. That was what made it unforgivable. Tomorrow he would continue. Tonight he knew what it cost. August 9th, 1945. Prisoner of war compound, Manila, Philippines. Harry Fukuhara walked into the compound commander's office at 8:30 hours. The commander handed him a single sheet of paper. "Read this to the prisoners," the commander said. "All of them. Today." Harry looked at the paper. It was a translated summary of a radio broadcast intercepted from Japan. The summary was 4 sentences long. On August 6th, 1945, a single American aircraft dropped a single bomb on the city of Hiroshima. The bomb destroyed approximately 5 square miles of the city center. Casualties estimated between 70,000 and 100,000. The weapon was atomic. Harry read the 4 sentences twice. His hands did not shake. His breathing did not change. He looked at the commander. "Is this confirmed?" "Confirmed," the commander said. "Second bomb dropped on Nagasaki this morning. War is probably over within days. Get the prisoners assembled." Harry walked out of the office holding the paper. He walked across the compound to the prisoner barracks. He found the Japanese officer who served as prisoner representative. Harry told him to assemble all prisoners in the main yard. The officer asked why. Harry said he had an announcement from the American command. The officer organized the assembly. It took 20 minutes. 147 Japanese prisoners stood in formation in the yard. They had been captured at various points during the previous 2 years, some from New Guinea, some from the Philippines, some from other Pacific islands. They stood at attention because that was the protocol they maintained even in captivity. Harry stood in front of them with the paper in his hand. He began reading in Japanese. On August 6, 1945, a single American aircraft dropped a single bomb on the city of Hiroshima. He continued through all 4 sentences. When he finished, he lowered the paper. The prisoners stood silent. Several of them were shaking their heads. One prisoner stepped forward. "That is not possible," the prisoner said. "One bomb cannot destroy a city." Harry looked at him. "It is possible. It happened." "You are lying," the prisoner said. "This is propaganda." Harry did not respond. He had expected this reaction. The prisoners had been isolated from news for months or years. They did not know about the Manhattan Project. They did not know about atomic weapons. They could not comprehend what one bomb could do. Harry could not comprehend it either, but he had the paper in his hand from the American command, and the American command did not issue propaganda to prisoners. Another prisoner stepped forward. "What kind of bomb?" he asked. "Atomic," Harry said. The prisoner looked confused. "What does that mean?" Harry did not know how to explain it. He had read the word atomic on the paper, but he did not understand the science. He only understood the result. 1 bomb, 1 city, 70,000 dead minimum. "I do not have technical information," Harry said. "I only have what I have read to you. Hiroshima has been destroyed. Most of the city no longer exists." The prisoners began talking among themselves. Their voices rose. Some were arguing that this was impossible. Some were asking if Harry had family in Hiroshima. Some were asking if there would be more bombs. Harry stood waiting for them to quiet. They did not quiet. The volume increased. The prisoner representative shouted for silence. The prisoners stopped talking. Harry looked at the faces in front of him. Some of these men were from Hiroshima Prefecture. He had interrogated several of them over the past year. He had asked them about their hometowns. He had listened to their stories. He had used those stories to build rapport. Now he was telling them their hometowns might not exist anymore. "That is all the information I have," Harry said. "You will be informed of further developments as they occur." He walked out of the yard. He walked back to the commander's office. He returned the paper. The commander asked if there were any problems. Harry said no. The commander dismissed him. Harry walked to his tent. He sat on his cot. He tried to calculate time zones. August 6th in Hiroshima would have been August 6th morning. It was now August 9th in Manila. 3 days had passed since the bomb. If his brothers were in Hiroshima on August 6th, they were either dead or they were not. There was no information available about individual casualties. There would not be information available for weeks or months, possibly years, possibly never. Harry had not heard from his brothers since September 1941. 4 years of silence. He did not know where they were. He did not know if they had been conscripted into military service. He did not know if they were in Hiroshima or Tokyo, or somewhere else in Japan, or dead on some Pacific island that Harry might have provided intelligence for operations against. The war ended 6 days later, August 15th, 1945. Emperor Hirohito announced surrender via radio broadcast. Harry heard the announcement translated by another linguist. The linguist said the Emperor's voice sounded strange, formal, ancient, like something from another era. Harry did not hear the actual broadcast. He only heard the translation. Japan has surrendered unconditionally. All military forces will cease operations immediately. The war is over. Harry was reassigned to occupation duty in Japan in October 1945. He flew to Tokyo and was assigned to General MacArthur's headquarters as a translator and liaison officer. His job was to translate orders from American occupation authorities to Japanese civilian administrators. He translated documents about food distribution, about reconstruction, about war crimes investigations, about demilitarization. He worked in an office in central Tokyo that had survived the firebombing. Most of Tokyo had not survived. Harry requested permission to travel to Hiroshima in December 1945. Permission was granted. He took a train from Tokyo. The journey took 12 hours. He arrived in Hiroshima on December the 18th, 1945, 4 months after the bomb. The train station still stood, but most of the city did not. Harry walked from the station toward the area where his relatives had lived. The streets were recognizable by their layout, but not by their buildings. Everything within 2 miles of the detonation point had been flattened. Some structures remained standing, but they were skeletons. Concrete frames with no walls, no roofs, no glass, just empty shapes. Harry found the neighborhood where his relative's house had been. The house did not exist. The entire block did not exist. There were no buildings, no walls, no markers, just cleared rubble and ash. Some people were living in temporary shelters made from salvaged metal and wood. Harry asked them if they knew the Fukuhara family. Several people recognized the name. They said the family had been in the city on August 6th. They did not know if anyone survived. Records were incomplete. Many bodies were never identified. Many people simply disappeared. Harry spent 3 days in Hiroshima searching for information. He checked refugee lists. He checked hospital lists. He checked casualty lists. The lists were chaotic and incomplete. Names were spelled differently by different administrators. Records were duplicated or missing. He found no confirmed information about his brothers or his relatives. On December 21st, 1945, Harry returned to Tokyo. He filed a report with the occupation authorities requesting assistance in locating his brothers. The authorities acknowledged the requests. They told him they would investigate. They told him it might take time. They told him many families were searching for missing relatives. He should be patient. Harry returned to his work translating documents. He translated orders about food rationing, about currency reform, about educational reform, about democratic governance. He translated speeches by Japanese officials accepting American guidance. He translated apologies. He translated compliance. He translated surrender in 1,000 different administrative forms. He received no information about his brothers. In August 1946, exactly 1 year after the bomb, Harry received permission to return to the United States. His service in the Military Intelligence Service was complete. He had served 4 years. He had conducted over 200 interrogations. He had translated thousands of documents. He had provided intelligence that contributed to multiple successful operations. His commanding officer wrote a commendation letter. The letter said Harry Fukuhara had performed his duties with exceptional skill and dedication. The letter said his service had been invaluable to the war effort. Harry boarded a transport ship in Yokohama. The ship arrived in San Francisco on September 3rd, 1946. Harry disembarked wearing his army uniform. Nobody was waiting for him. He took a bus to the central station and bought a ticket to Los Angeles. He arrived in Los Angeles the next morning. His mother and sister had been released from Gila River internment camp in 1945. They were living in a small apartment in the Little Tokyo neighborhood. Harry knocked on the door. His mother opened it. She looked at him. She did not cry. She said, "You are home." Harry said yes. She led him inside. They did not talk about the war that first day. They did not talk about the camp. They did not talk about Hiroshima. They sat in the apartment and ate a meal his mother prepared and spoke about ordinary things, where Harry would sleep, what work he might find, how the neighborhood had changed. The next day, his mother asked if he had learned anything about his brothers. Harry said no. She nodded. She did not ask again. Harry found work as a clerk in a shipping company. He did not tell his employer about his military service. He did not mention that he spoke Japanese. He did not mention his intelligence work. That work was classified. He had been instructed not to discuss it with anyone outside the military. The classification would remain in effect for decades. Harry worked at the shipping company for 3 years. Then he found work at another company, then another. He moved between jobs that required no particular skills and offered no particular future. In 1972, the Military Intelligence Service records were partially declassified. Historians began writing about the Nisei linguists who had served in the Pacific. Some newspapers published articles. Some veterans were interviewed. Harry was contacted by a researcher who asked about his service. Harry confirmed that he had served in the MIS. He confirmed that he had worked as an interrogator and translator. He did not provide details. The researcher thanked him and said his service had been important. Harry said thank you and ended the conversation. In the 1980s, the United States government formally apologized for the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Surviving internees received compensation payments. Harry received a check for $20,000. The check came with a letter from the president. The letter said the internment had been a grave injustice. The letter said the government regretted its actions. The letter said this payment was a token of national apology. Harry deposited the check. He did not frame the letter. In 2011, the Military Intelligence Service veterans were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. Harry was 91 years old. He attended the ceremony in Washington. The Speaker of the House gave a speech. The speech said the MIS linguists had provided intelligence that shortened the war and saved lives. The speech said their service had been performed under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. The speech said the nation was grateful. Harry accepted the medal. He shook hands with the speaker. He posed for a photograph. He returned to his home in California. He placed the medal in a drawer. He never received confirmed information about what happened to his brothers. Records from Hiroshima remain incomplete. Many families never learned the fates of relatives who were in the city on August 6, 1945. Harry made inquiries over the decades. He contacted relief organizations. He contacted Japanese government offices. He received no definitive answers. His brothers had been in Japan in 1941. They had possibly been in Hiroshima in 1945. After that, there was only silence. Harry Fukuhara died on March 25, 2015, at the age of 95. His obituary mentioned his military service. It mentioned the Congressional Gold Medal. It mentioned that he had been born in Seattle. and had served his country with distinction. It did not mention that he had spent 77 years not knowing whether his decision to return to America in 1938 had saved his life or cost him his family. It did not mention that every interrogation he conducted, every document he translated, every prisoner he befriended and betrayed had been done while carrying the knowledge that his brothers were on the other side of the war he was helping to win. The obituary said he was survived by his wife and children. It said memorial services would be private. It said in lieu of flowers, donations could be made to the Japanese American National Museum. It did not say whether his brothers survived the war. That information was not available.